So, Ivan, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, good to be here.
Um, I always like to go back to the start when I first start talking to somebody, and I guess for you, before we get to maybe horror and things like that, what first brought filmmaking into your life as I guess, as a more serious avenue? I feel like a lot of people, have dreams of being different things, but and as I well know, and I think I've heard you mention this before in previous interviews. Coming from Ireland, a lot of that stuff kind of feels like I think you likened it to, being an astronaut or going to the moon. And it
Yeah,
does
yeah.
kind of feel like that. So how does it go from, I guess, a dream to reality?
Well, it wasn't a dream for a long time. I'm from Finglas, which is working very was very it probably still is very working class Dublin. And there you left school and you got a job. You didn't nobody had a career. Nobody I went to school with went to college other than technical college stuff like that. So your what you were allowed to or encouraged to dream for was very limited. I found, and you're kind of surrounded all this time with this kind of negativity where you could never dream beyond your box, and if you did, they try and bring you down again. But I always had this love for film. I was quite a lonely kid. I hated school. I hated where I lived, and it was kind of like an escape for me. I just loved the fantasy of films rather than reality where I was at the time. And when I was about 14 or 13, my mother got like a high 8 video camera. And I just started to mess around with the camera. I started to edit from VHS to VHS machine. And the editing is what got me first. It was that the magic of that cut between one shot and another. It just grabbed me and I just loved it. And then I'd make short films with my friends. And then I got a high 8 or a Super 8 camera, a film camera, and I started to make Super 8 films. And when I was about maybe 20 or 21, something like that, someone said you should send one of these films into a festival or something, which had never occurred to me. And they just started to win prizes and get good reviews. And I was just encouraged to keep going. But the idea of becoming a filmmaker was just, as I said before, it was like becoming an astronaut. I was so beyond my reach, I didn't even think about it. But it was this deep love of cinema I had. I just love cinema more than reality. I still do.
Same as, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating for me to, obviously we're both from Ireland, and I can a lot of times when I hear you speak about that stuff, it kind of really resonates with me because I still feel like there's a little bit of a degree of that. Obviously, we've come on from then, but there is still a little bit of that. I don't know, that old school, like deep seated Irish, like go and get a real job, would you?
Yeah,
Um,
there's still that, and a lot of that, especially if you're from a working class background like I was, it was like you need to start saying, okay, I need to keep that person out of my life now, because this person is dragging me down. If I stick around this person, they're going to just going to keep me on this level, and I want to go somewhere else. I want to go beyond here. I want to do stuff. I don't want what everyone else has, like an ordinary job and stuff like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I've worked plenty of ordinary jobs trying to fund my early films, but it just wasn't for me. I just I love movies so much, and I just this is what I wanted to do, and nothing was going to stop me. So when I started leaving certain people behind who were saying you can never do that, who do you think you are? Then things started to happen for me. When you surround yourself with positive people and like-minded people, things started to happen.
Maybe for the people out there, I think there's a lot of people that listen to this that are aspiring filmmakers, writers, or in any, I guess, creative endeavor. You can kind of get a lot of that pushback. Um, what I suppose, what advice would you give to someone, or because it does sound like you obviously went through that? Because I was going to ask that question of, like, how long did you kind of progress through that? Because it can be quite difficult for people. Someone constantly in your ear telling you, like, you're a fucking idiot. Why are you doing this? Just go and get a job in the supermarket. And it's constant. And I think sometimes people do it from. I always used to reference it as like it was a very Irish thing, but maybe I was just doing it because my experience was obviously coming from Ireland.
Yeah.
But I as the years went on, I kind of sat back and went, a lot of people are not even doing this from a bad place. They don't
No.
even realize what it is that they're actually doing, and they're like, look, you'll be fine here with us. We'll go to the pub on a Friday night, and
Yeah, yeah.
Monday back in work, and that's it.
I think it's just tenacity, you just have to keep going, no matter what anyone says. And people are going to, as you say, they don't even know. It's because they've been brought down throughout their lives, I think, and it's just automatic reaction, Some of it might be, I don't want you to do better than me, or they feel threatened, or they don't want to lose you, or stuff like that. But some of them might be coming from a good place where they might be trying to save you pain, as in, who do you think someone like you making movies or whatever it is your dream is, But you just have to completely ignore that, I was making films for 10 years. I self-funded my first three feature films before I got any funding at all, before I started to make a living out of it. I worked 2 and 3 jobs at a time just to buy editing equipment and my own cameras. And my philosophy was always just concentrate on the work, just keep making the films, and the rest will follow and it will come. And during those 10 years, and it was hellish sometimes, I was in relationships with people, and some of my family were saying, this is never going to happen. What you're doing, you need to get proper jobs, you need to get permanent, like a vocation, or a career, or something else, something more achievable. But I said, no, this is all I wanted to do. And I just kept going and going and going. And eventually, one of my films, feature films I made, called The Solution, was spotted by the head of the Irish Film Board, a guy called Simon Perry at the time, and he saw it at a festival in South Africa. And he just gave me a call one day, and he said, I saw your film, and I loved it so much. And what do you want to do next? He said, And for me, this is what I always dreamed of for those 10 years, And it was like, it came true. What I always thought was, I just have to keep going, not care what anyone else thinks, just enjoy what I'm doing, make it all about the work, and the rest will follow. And it did, and it still has since then.
Do you feel like there was a shift in maybe people's perception of you? Those inner personal relationships maybe that you were either struggling with, or people maybe you pushed away. Did you feel like there was any kind of a shift, I guess, since that point? And maybe not immediately, but when they realized, oh wait, this isn't like, it wasn't just a one-off thing. Now he's done another project and another project and another thing. And
Yeah.
um, did you find that, like, in your personal life, that people were kind of maybe changing their perception of what it was you were actually doing?
Yeah, I mean, certain people dropped away, and they had to drop away. But other people, they when they started to see the films winning awards and getting good reviews, and getting some attention, they couldn't deny that I was onto something. And so they started to come around. But it really depended on the person. But my parents came around pretty quickly, and they helped me financially towards the beginning, and I'm really grateful for that. My 2 sisters, once I started to win awards and stuff, they were really helpful. I requisitioned people's houses, my friends' houses, anywhere I could shoot. If I needed extras or extra crew, I just dragged people in. So, that's what Ivan does. He makes films, so let's have him out. And because it's so much fun making films, and because I like to create it like a very creative, fun atmosphere on films. People liked being involved for no money or whatever, and we'd all share the end result together and see what we were doing and see that we were making something good. So those people came around, but other people, more negative people, had to fall away. And that was painful sometimes, to cut people off from your life. But you do have to do it, I think, in order to achieve anything, because other people are always going to pull you back.
Yeah, and it's funny, and again, I think that um, suggestion I made earlier about, I felt like it was a very Irish thing, maybe sometimes, to do that. And I talked to a lot of people in the UK who kind of mirrored
Yeah,
that same feeling. And it's funny because I feel like close family members and, like, the people who love you, as soon as you show them that glimmer of, like, oh, Ivan isn't just mad.
yeah,
He's actually making movies. All of a sudden, there's like this switch where everybody's like, right, pile in, everyone jump on like,
yeah,
we're gonna help, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And then other people can be quite cold to that.
yeah.
do you think it's healthy to have a little bit of I don't want to say dwelling on those people that are like, what are you doing or why or whatever, but is it healthy maybe to have that in the back of your mind and use that as maybe a little bit of a driving force? And then I guess secondary to that, a lot of people talk to me about chasing a dream like this and struggling with relationships and things, and they feel like they can't keep it together because a lot of people don't understand. It can be quite lonely, and
Yeah,
you can lose girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives, kids. It becomes a very difficult balancing act between the two.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I lost relationships and everything because of it. You know, it couldn't be helped, and you know, I needed to do it for them and for myself, and I would have been terrible without it. You know, you know, if you really want something, you just this is all you want to do, and nothing can stop you. You know, and that's kind of the driving force that you need. You almost need an unshakable belief in yourself and what you're doing in order to keep going, and because there is going to be many setbacks, there still is setbacks. You know, for me, you know. I had a film fall apart last year. I mean, that was, and I worked 3 years getting it together, you know. But those are just you need to be strong like that, and just keep going no matter what it throws at you, you know, and always concentrate on the work, but because that's what's most important, you know. But I was pretty lucky. I was in a long-term relationship at the time, and that person was very understanding and stuff, and she came around and helped out making the films as well, and we used our apartment many times during the films. So, but it is hard to. You're right. It is hard to maintain that because people deserve and want attention, and sometimes you just can't give it to them because you want to make films. But you need to choose what you want in your life. You know, if you want to get married and have kids at that particular point, you can still make films. But for me, I couldn't have done that because my resources were limited money wise. I'm the kind of person that needs to be all in for something. I can't multitask, you know. I can't juggle different types of lives. And I said it to the person at the time. I said it to her. I said, "This is all I wanted to do, you know. And if you like, you can get off this particular train that I'm on, or you can come along with me if you like, you know." And I was very honest about that. And I said, "Nothing is going to stop me." So, and that's what I just kept going like that, and I still do.
This is the first time I think probably ever in all the people I've talked to that someone has been very straight about that. It's not I feel like a lot of times people kind of give an answer and then maybe kind of come back a bit from that, and because maybe they don't want to be seen as the person to just say it outright. You kind of want to dance that line between, well, you know what, you can have 10 kids and
Yeah,
have no money and then also try and self-fund, and which is not the
yeah,
reality, like you just said. And I think it's important for people to know that there's probably going to be lots of situations, and I'm sure you had it, where it's not nice and it's not comfortable and it feels like
yeah.
shit, but then
Well,
you
well,
have to.
maybe it depends on what type of person you are, though. At the same time, and if you're independently wealthy or not, you know. And I wasn't, you know. I didn't want to buy a house, and although I was had a mortgage on a small mortgage on an apartment I was sharing with someone, but I didn't want to buy a house, and I didn't want kids at that particular time, and I needed to funnel all my money into my films, and I was working jobs only to do that, you know. But other people can juggle that because they have the resources and the money to do that. But I knew what I needed to do. I knew the sacrifices that I needed to make, and I was willing to make them. And they were painful sacrifices sometimes. You know, I could see a lot of people like who had chosen different parts or different paths in life were getting you know, monetary success maybe in the jobs you're getting. But I was saying, I just my path is slower, and I will get there eventually. And I'd rather have the love of what I'm doing than lots of financial returns immediately, you know. But all that did come then later on, you know, when I started to get funding from the films and stuff, you know, and I started to make a living out of it. But as I said, it was 10 years.
As someone, I just find it fascinating, as someone that's come from like I guess a quote unquote old school Irish background. um you kind of speak quite matter of fact about a lot of things. I feel like we were always kind of taught to repress a lot of that stuff, and I think eventually, then when it does rear its head, it's like this huge explosion, and things just go crazy. But it seems like, were you all did you always have that mentality that you were able to kind of keep an even keel and not allow it to, because I feel like everybody says, okay, this is what I want to do and whatever, and then when things start to fall apart, all of a sudden your life spirals out of control, and then maybe the dream falls away and you just become manic, and then you try and claw it back, and it kind of keeps doing this dip.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, that just, the minute that starts to happen, it's like, oh, okay, that's it. Then I'm done.
No,
I
if you do that, you'll never, because there will be setbacks all the time, and there'll be huge highs and then really low lows. And I've been at the bottom many times, and but you just have to keep going no matter what. I remember, because of where I grew up, it was very working class. I went to really rough schools. I mean, really rough, and I wasn't a rough person. I got through it. I had friends and stuff like that, but I wasn't cut out for the toughness of where I went to school or where I was brought up. And I learned to just not care. I was into what I was into, and I didn't care what anyone else thought. So and when I was very young, I loved classical music. I loved 20th century classical music, like Penderecki and stuff, the kind of stuff that you ended up using in horror movies and stuff. And I didn't care what any of the other kids in school, teenagers, thought in school. They were into whatever was out in the 80s, whatever. And I always had that mentality of, I'm into what I'm into, and I don't care what you're into, and you're welcome to what you're into. So I think that strength, that outsider kind of strength, came from that, and then I was able to use that later on for making movies. But that was kind of more like a defense mechanism for where I grew up, because it was so rough, and I wasn't.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely, like, everything you're saying. It resonates with me so much. When then does it hit the point? And I obviously know this is going to be an individual answer between everybody, but for you specifically, when does the decision come, like, that? Okay, now maybe I can start to introduce some of these other things, like, having a child, or getting a bit more serious, or settling down in a certain location. And maybe I could be completely wrong about this, but is there always, like, an anxiety financially about, like you just mentioned, you spent 3 years working on a project that fell apart.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so, like, how do you know when is the right time to, like, okay, I'm okay to do this now, and then obviously have that fear of, like, well, the rug could be pulled from under me at any point with any project.
Yeah, you just have to take a leap of faith. I mean, there is no right time to do it. I mean, it is such an unstable business. I was lucky in a way, because I'm also a writer, so I can in between movies I can earn a living writing, and I've ghost written many scripts with no credit for other filmmakers as well. And I've done that, and I've written my own scripts. I've been in development with my own scripts. Some scripts have never been made into films, but I still got paid for writing them. If I hadn't had that safety net of writing, then I don't think I could have survived. But for me, it happened when the Canal, the first sort of film with a budget, it was less than €1 million, but it was the first kind of budget that I had. When that started to be successful, and when it premiered at Tribeca and stuff, and then started to tour around the world, and that's where I met my wife. Was at a festival here in Sweden, and she was one of the festival organizers, and she picked the films that were going to be on, and we just met, and you know just fell in love, and that was the right time, because I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to stay with her, but it just happened to coincide when I had money, and it felt completely right. And we have struggled financially since then, but it's been pretty stable, and it just I didn't plan it that way. It just happened, and it happened to coincide with a time when I was okay financially. So we just went with it, and we had 2 kids now.
What's that experience like? You mentioned ghostwriting scripts for people. Is that is that a strange experience? Obviously, I know. Look, it's a job. It's what you like to do, but in the sense of, ghostwriting, for people who don't know, you have no connection to the work, basically. You just paid to write. Is that a difficult thing to do as a creative to kind of, I don't know, craft a story, a world, characters, and things like that, and then hand them off and be like, well, technically, this isn't mine.
No, not really. I mean, I put my all into it. I listen to them. I listen to what they need. For me, it's usually they either they needed a dialogue rewrite or structural rewrite. It's very technical kind of stuff, you know. I mean, the scripts I get, I have ghostwritten in the past, and I haven't done it in a while. But the one I did was also always about structure and always polishing what was already there. Sometimes I read a script that was so bad that I couldn't have done anything with it. I would have had to rewrite the whole thing completely, and I wouldn't have done that because then that would have been completely mine, you know. But if someone presents me with a script where, oh, I can see this section needs rewriting, this section needs rewriting, they need better scares, they need better set pieces, then that's okay because it's kind of a technical thing, you know. And for me, because my films, even though they might not seem like it, because some of them are genre films, might not seem like it on the outside, might not seem personal. They are very personal to me, and I never put the personal into stuff I ghostwrite. It's very technical. Everyone's usually satisfied with what I do, but I don't put myself into it, and I always put myself into all my films. So that's the difference, and that's how I'm able to do it.
Is there, people think about the skills that it takes to be a filmmaker, and they think of things maybe like, oh, well, I should dabble maybe in writing. I should, I've heard a lot of times you should, if you want to get into this, PA on sets and just do anything. Literally,
Yeah,
just do anything and get in and try and work every little job and do everything right on the side. Shoot shorts with your friends, do all that stuff. But there's a lot of other skills that I've come to learn that are involved that are equally as important that people forget. And I'd like to hear your opinion on this. The idea of being business savvy, I guess, to a degree, and having, some form of awareness of social media and like that, how to kind of market yourself. But then also, I suppose, when you sit down in a meeting to pitch your idea to somebody who, okay, maybe they're a film producer and maybe they're a head of a company, but maybe they're not necessarily a horror fan or a fan of this style or that style. And you being able to, I suppose, express why
yeah,
this is accessible to everybody, not just me who loves it and created it, but
yeah.
this is the reason you should give me the money.
Yeah, I mean, the first two, I'm hopeless businessman. I'm absolutely terrible. I rely on other people for that. Money just slips through my fingers like water. You know, it's ridiculous. But business, I'm terrible at. Social media is something new to me. I'm only just joined Instagram and stuff. I used to be on Twitter, but I found it really depressing, so I kind of left it. So social media, I usually leave to producers and stuff for films. But as far as getting across your ideas to others, that's just let the passion flow out of you, you know, just say whatever. You need to find a way of getting that across to people, and for some reason I've been able to do that. I don't know, I just speak from my heart. I speak why this needs to be made, you know. I seem to be good at convincing people into doing stuff that they are not initially convinced of, you know, and that's through speaking truthfully and from the heart and with passion, and it usually works, you know.
Do you find, just on the topic of, I suppose you could tie it to social media in a way, I feel like people more and more want to know about the filmmaker, about the person who wrote it. Like, I have a lot of friends who are not involved in film, don't really have, they like movies and things, but they're not fans. But I notice them now, say if we go to the cinema to see something,
Yeah,
and I remember actually taking two friends to see Long Legs when it came out,
yeah,
and it's like a really kind of obscure movie in a way. And instantly when it came out, both of them were on their phone looking up like, okay, who made this? What was the idea? Where did
yeah.
that come from? Nicolas Cage this, Nicolas Cage that. And I'm like, that there's something to that there. Do you find that people are maybe increasingly more interested in like the person behind the story
No,
or
I
the
think
character?
it's always been that. I mean, when you know, when I started to be into film, the internet didn't exist, so You know, it was so I collected film books. I still have hundreds of film books. You know, I wanted to know what other directors thought and how they did things and what was their mindset, and it was usually very inspiring. So I don't think that's particularly new. You know, and maybe the types of things they want to know, but about people are different. But I don't think so. I think everything's just so accessible now. You can just look it up straight away. So it seems like everyone is into that, but people who really love films have always loved films. They've always done things like that. They've always been into directors and directors' lives and filmmakers' lives. You know, so I don't think that's anything new.
What would you say is the most challenging thing you've learned so far in this career? Is there something that sticks out in your mind as like, yeah, that was a pretty like hard lesson to learn?
Oh, I mean, it happens every day on the set. Usually, you know, there's usually something, you know, whether I mean, but it's all good, you know. It's I was lucky in a way because I didn't go to film school or anything like that. I'm completely self-taught, and in the beginning, I shot or co-shot, I edited, I wrote, sometimes acted in. I did everything. I recorded the sound. I did the sound design, and I learned all of the departments of filmmaking. So when it came to working with actual crews, big crew, nobody could tell me you can't do that or that's not possible or that's not the way you do things because I had already done it, you know. And for me, that was the best way is by doing, you know, and but you still learn hard lessons. I mean, some actors can be very difficult. It's sometimes all actors need to be treated very differently from each other. They're all individuals. That's something, although again, that's something you learn very early on, even with amateur actors or the first actors you work with. Those skills are carried through into big actors like John Cusack or whoever else I worked with, Emil Hirsch, other actors, more experienced actors. Those same lessons you learn from the beginning are exactly the same. And the pleasures of making films at the very beginning with no money are the same pleasures you have later on with some money, you know. So lessons there's I could go through individual lessons, you know. I suppose maybe dropping the ball a little on some of the publicity of my films. I don't think they've always been marketed correctly, you know. Sometimes I mistakenly left that to the producers or the distributors and I shouldn't have, you know. And because I so carefully control every other aspect, I probably made a mistake in a couple of times of handing that over to someone else and not being involved. I think the films probably suffered because of that, because of they were presented to the world in the wrong way, in the way that I didn't want them to be presented as, you know, or to the world. So that was a hard lesson, and you know, well, there's too many to
Yeah,
mention, you know.
I've heard that actually several times, kind of behind the scenes, that you know, people bring up being so creatively involved in a project for maybe 2, 3 years, from like the initial concept to the completion of post production, and then maybe handing off the, you know, all the market and all the advertising, and not really having a, you know, like, okay, that's, I've left it to them now. That they're obviously going to care about the promotion of this as much as I cared about the creation of it,
Yeah,
and it just doesn't
it's not
translate.
always the case, you know.
Yeah, it just doesn't translate, and I feel like it's unfortunate because there's probably a lot of films out there that really do deserve more, and it's, I guess it's the good thing about the internet in a way, is like a lot of movies now kind of get a second life cycle if they are good. Someone discovers them, whether it be a YouTuber or a TikToker or something, and they post it somewhere, and the next thing then it's like boom, it's on the top of the, you know, iTunes charts again for a couple of weeks and whatever, which is nice. But so is that something then that you kind of try to keep an eye on? I know probably can't control 100% or anything, but do you like to keep your ear in those conversations then when it gets to that point?
I've tried, and Shudder, who did Son, that one behind me, they were very good at involving you into publicity and stuff, and asking me, did I like this poster or didn't? Because that was the first time that ever happened, you know, which is crazy, you know. I hated the poster, the American poster for the Canal. I think it ruined that release. It was complete. It was presented, and they're still using it as this schlocky horror film, which it was not, and it is not, you know. I think it's quite an intelligent horror film, an experimental horror film, but they presented it as something that it completely wasn't. And I protested at the time. I sent them emails. I begged them, please don't release this poster, but they completely ignored me, and they went ahead with it. But like you said, I mean, films do have a second life, and the Canal has lived on. It's still in top 10 lists and stuff online, and people still talk about it, and it's still available, and it's done very well on streaming and stuff like that, and it's still available everywhere. So it does have a second life, but it does hurt when someone completely misunderstands what you tried to do, what you spent 2 years of your life doing so very carefully, But usually when you get to post production or after post production, when it goes out, that people see this as their department. You're just a filmmaker. You shouldn't really be involved with this, and there is still a keep out kind of attitude about it, but it's getting better. And Shudder were very good, I found, with Son, and I really liked the poster that they presented, and the way they presented it, that was the first time I ever had that. And same with Never Grow Old. I think that was presented in the wrong way as well, as this kind of action western, which it definitely wasn't, and I definitely didn't make. And I know everyone was on the same page as me when we were making it. This is not an action western. This is something different, But it was presented as that, especially by the American distributors, as an action kind of movie, and it's not. And the problem with that is the people who should be watching it don't get to see it, and
Yeah.
then the people who shouldn't be watching it, who mightn't know, who mightn't understand a more deliberately paced kind of a western, more of a drama, with sort of maybe gothic sort of horror elements. They're expecting something different. They're expecting a shoot 'em up, which is not, So this poster or this publicity is selling to the wrong people, and it just doesn't work, So I think it's very important to always, for them to engage with the filmmaker, So on my next one, I'm hoping that will happen. Let's see.
Do you find, and I especially notice this, I have family in the States, and, I go back and forth quite a bit, and I try to get involved in, I guess, the genre in the States as well as much as I can. And anytime I mention being from Ireland, the Canal always comes up.
Really?
And yeah, and like so many people are like, oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that. I love that movie. Do you find, when you make something like that and it resonates specifically, like obviously with the horror community, um, and even I suppose, even if we move up to more recent times with Son and things like that, do you still get that thing where I don't know, you get maybe pigeonholed in meetings in the sense of like, okay, so what else have you got? And then maybe you tell them something, they go, yeah, yeah, can you make it more like the Canal? Can you make it more
Yeah.
like Sun?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it was funny with the Canal, although it did really well in America, especially, at festivals and stuff like that, and won awards and things like that, got great, amazing reviews. I had a lot of meetings with production companies after, like Blumhouse, all the majors,
Oh, you
and they
done the
all
water
loved it. They
bottle
all
tour?
said they loved the Canal, and but I found when I was pitching them ideas, what they were pretty much saying was, we love the Canal, but please don't make something like the Canal again. It was a little too extreme for them. It was it pushed things a little too far for the American sensibilities, I think. And so they were kind of holding me back a bit. I found, and which was really strange, because the reason they loved it is because the film went there, went places that other horror films didn't go to. But at the same time, they were afraid to go there themselves. So it was the opposite reaction, actually. And they still say they love the Canal, but don't want me to make anything like that again in America.
Do you so you obviously done the water bottle tour by the sounds of it. I've heard
Yeah,
about this infamous water bottle tour so many times. When you go on that and just even hear from like an audience standpoint, you're mentioning names like Blumhouse and I'm
yeah.
sure the rest of the studios. Uh, as a professional, is that kind of an exciting slash daunting experience to be like, I'm meeting like all these people from those companies that we hear about on this side of the world all the time. And then also, I guess, looking back on that now, um, I've heard so many times as well that a lot of those meetings are, you get really excited in your head, but then soon realize when you walk away, you're like, okay, this is what we do.
Yeah, Americans, the American producers and companies, they compliment you to death, you know. Yeah, but nothing ever comes of it usually, you know. But sometimes it does. I mean, when after I made the Canal, BBC Worldwide came to me and they asked me, had any ideas for a horror film series? And I wrote an adaptation of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, the ghost story, you know, it was set in Venice in the modern times, you know. It was a 6-part TV series. So they flew me to Los Angeles and we pitched to all the networks. So I went to all the offices of, I think we went to Blumhouse, we went to HBO, we went to Stars, we went to Showtime, we went to Fox, we went to them all, and they all said they loved it, but only one picked it up, you know. So and that was the very first one we pitched to. So some of them mean it, some of them don't, but they're usually all very complimentary, and it's usually very easy to pitch to them because they are so nice and enthusiastic about it, you know. But it doesn't mean they're going to buy it either, you know. But they have it's strange with TV. I haven't had a good experience with TV really. They have unlimited money and they don't care if they drop projects, you know. So it's very disorientating, you know. It's I wrote those 6 episodes, but they decided, the network, which was Universal, they decided they weren't going to make limited series anymore, only continuing series, and ours was limited. So they decided to shelve it. So like 2 years or 3 years of work went down the drain, you know, which was that was a hard lesson, you know, but it's just part of the business, you know.
Yeah, I actually spoke with someone earlier this week that mentioned something similar about like some of these companies seem to have just like unlimited resources where
Yeah,
they just like it's like they batch buy things for fear that maybe other companies might take it, it might do
yeah.
well, and they're just willing to just like dump it on a shelf somewhere and go, oh well, we're just never going to do anything with that.
What was so heartbreaking about this was that although they didn't want to make it, they also didn't want us to pitch it to other networks. So I couldn't do anything with it, you know, which was really heartbreaking, you know. But luckily I had the Western coming up, so I just went straight onto that. But it wasn't as if my whole life was depending on this TV series. But it was a hard lesson, and to be honest, it was one of the best writing experiences I ever had. Their notes were fantastic. It was roses all the way, you know. And but then they just didn't make it, and it's nothing personal. It's just they don't make the majority of what they fund to write. You know, that's just the way it is. You know.
Is that difficult as a, you know, because obviously I'm sure you grew up a fan, you're still an audience member to a degree as well as you know, a creator in the space. Is it difficult though, you know, when you get into those situations not to jump the gun? Like I feel like if I was to maybe be put in some of those rooms that like instantly I'd be like, yeah, I'll just say yes. It's universal. I'll just say yes to whatever. And you know, I've
Yeah,
heard horror stories where people said maybe they didn't take the right people with them, or they didn't kind of sit themselves down before the water bottle tour and kind of say, right, I need to like relax here for a second. And they
yeah,
were willing to nearly give anything for anything just to be, you know, involved.
yeah. No, I mean that didn't happen with me. It was only if only one company came back and bought it. You know, it wasn't as if they said, "Well, we'll take it on the spot," and they never say that. Even the company that ended up buying it, they just listen. They say, "Thanks for coming in. We'll have an internal meeting about it, and we'll get back to you." Usually they say no, but one of them usually says yes. But so that never happened with me.
Just to go back to something you mentioned earlier about, you know, being completely self-taught and
Yeah,
the idea of film school. I don't know where you sit on this idea or not, but I feel like now, you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, everybody has an iPhone in their pocket. You can shoot on that. You can do a lot of cool things and unique things with that and show your creativity." But then on the other side, I feel like maybe as things have advanced, a lot of places have gotten more like, "Okay, well, what school did you go to? What credential do you have? What piece of paper have you got?" Where do you sit on the importance of that? And do you think that that's can you still get your foot in the door by just showing who you are, or do you need to do that and also have a piece of paper from a place to say, "Oh yeah, you know, he's passed the test."
no, I mean, for me, if I'm hiring people, I don't care what school they went to. I just want to see their work. You know, if I'm hiring an actor, I don't care whether they went to any school. I just want to see their show reel or their audition tape or whatever, and I pick them through that. I mean, that's for me is personally that's what I do. I mean, if a cinematographer comes to me and they show me a show reel, I'd say you're amazing. Yeah, you're hired. I don't care what if they went to Dunleary or New York or whatever, or NYU or whatever. If they're talented, they're talented. But that's just me, as far as being a filmmaker and a director, you are a filmmaker. You just have to convince other people you are. Um, it's just when if you present a body of work to people, then it's undeniable. What do you need credentials for? Here's my credentials. Here's my proof of concept. Here's what I can do. Do you want to be involved or don't you want to be involved? Fine by me. If you don't, I'll move on to someone else. And that's the way I always thought. But that's just me. Other maybe if more technicians, maybe they do need to go to film school. Maybe it is better as a cinematographer to go to film school to learn lighting and stuff like that. So it's all very individual. And if you read enough biographies of filmmakers, nobody has ever done it the same way. Everyone has been different. Some have dropped out of film school, like John Carpenter. John Carpenter dropped out of film school to make Dark Star. David Lynch went to film school and he used his time in film school to make a short and then began Eraserhead. And Scorsese went to film school, but others didn't. The early guys certainly didn't. So it's all individual. But if you have a body of work and you have something that's you can prove to someone I can make movies, then you don't need any piece of paper. And I certainly have never ever heard anyone based on where they went to school or what credentials they have ever.
And it's funny you say that because I've heard multiple times as well that, like, people, if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity to go to film school, I've heard it from a couple of different people that were like, I literally just used it to ingrain myself in the community and get connections with other people. And okay, I
Yeah,
need you know, a DOP, I need an editor, I needed this, I needed that, and this person is into this, and just kind of building that little family
yeah.
was nearly more important than like anything they actually learned per se, or pieces of paper they got at the end. If you had to restart everything today at the start of 2025, how would you go about it? Um, in I guess the modern day.
I go about it exactly the same way because that's I would have got lost in film school. I would have been that guy in the corner who was the quiet guy in the corner. Because I'm not the gregarious type in a crowd. I hate that stuff. I'm not that particularly social. I need when I need to be. I am film like to talk to execs or whatever, or on a set. I particularly am, but I would have been lost in film school. If it was a film school where only a certain person gets to be director, I wouldn't have been picked. So I knew that. I knew I had to go my own way, and I knew I had to do it my own way. So if I was making films now today, I mean, I'd get my own editing software. I'd if I had to use my camera on my phone, I would. But I think psychologically, it's better to have a camera, and rather than a phone because it's so throwaway and anyone can do that. But people have made amazing stuff on iPhones as well. I just get any camera, I'd get editing equipment, and I begin no matter what. And the first few, I mean, unless you're Orson Welles or something, the first couple are not going to be good, and people are probably say it's not good, but just keep going, because even if it's not the first few short films or whatever you make aren't very good, then it's a good lesson for the next one and the next one and the next one. Just keep working, don't stop, don't listen to anyone, and keep making films, and learn the skills, learn what makes good sound, learn where to put the mic, learn how to light people. So when you come to like me, when you come to be on the film set with a real crew, then you have a grounding in all departments. So you know how to talk to someone, and there will be people who are lazy and say you can't do it that way, or who are stuck in their way of doing things, and you say no, I want to do this because I've done this before, and this is how you do it, and this is how I want to do it. So for me, I do it exactly the same way, but that's just me. Someone else might completely thrive in the film school environment.
I have one or two quick questions before I let you go today. Do you have any comfort horror movies?
Oh
Movies
yeah.
that you would find yourself, they kind of sit atop the list as, like, I don't know, ones you put on in the background when you're doing something else, or you rewatch them several times. I don't like to ask what's your favorite movie because I feel like it can be quite difficult. It can change throughout your life. But as regards just comfort ones that you enjoy to just put on over and over?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean when you mean comfort horror movies. I've had so many of them over the years. You know, it used to be The Shining. I mean, I must have watched that 300 or 400 times. I don't know. It's just to have it on, just to watch the shots, just to watch a scene or something. But I feel like that's, it used to be like when I started watching it in 1990, which was 10 years after it came out. And I remember the first time I watched it, and it was very, it wasn't particularly well received at the time. And even during 1990, it wasn't had that big a following. So it felt like a secret that I had, that I loved it. I didn't care what anyone else thought. And then because it's become more popular over the years, and everyone, even someone who isn't even the horror movie, says it's their favorite horror movie now.
Yeah.
So I kind of went off that one, and lately I've been watching just because it's good fun, and I love the technical skill of watching it. I've loved Drag Me to Hell with it's the Sam Raimi movie, which I think is great fun, and it's genuinely scary, and it's very inventive, has a great ending. Night of the Demon is another one, the one from the 50s, the Jacques Tourneur film. I just love the atmosphere of that. Eraserhead used to be another one, when I just had the VHS. I used to have this terrible VHS, but something about the terrible quality of it added to it for the midnight movie kind of quality to that film, you know. But I haven't watched that in quite a while, so I go through phases, you know. But right now it's Drag Me to Hell, which cheers me up, and it's very inspiring, and it's kind of thing you can dip into and dip out of, and it's very, very inventive.
It's funny. I've had this conversation a lot recently, and I've had some filmmakers come back and say, you know what, I would actually nearly prefer my work to be considered a comfort movie for many people rather than it, be, oh, this is the best movie of the year, and then nobody ever, ever, ever speaks about it again.
Yeah.
We get some of these movies that I suppose when they
Oh,
came
so
out,
many. Yeah.
they were just a blip on the map and nobody thought that they were ever going to be anything. And now we're sitting here in 2025 talking about them still among lots of other people as well who are. I could talk to you all day. I know that you're a busy man, you have stuff to do. Where can people, I suppose, find you or best support you now if they want to kind of keep an eye on what's coming next?
Well, just look out for in the trades, whatever variety stuff like that. You know, and I should have a big announcement coming up pretty soon. We're aiming to begin prep on one in June or July. Fingers crossed. Films do fall apart all the time. I have several films in the works. You know, I've learned that over the years. You need to juggle many projects because many won't happen. You know, I think I have 4 feature films that are in various stages of the development and pre-production. So. And one of them is bound to happen this year. So, as far as social media goes, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not a very good Instagrammer. I don't keep up with it that much, and I don't update it that much. But occasionally I do if there's a good article online about one of my films or something like that. And certainly if there's an announcement about my next film, I will put it up there. You know. So Instagram is the only one. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter or any of those things.
So for everybody listening, whether it's video or audio, all the links to Ivan's movies, I'll find the links. They'll be all in the description down below, as well as his Instagram and a few other bits. Final question then before I let you go is, why horror and what does it mean to you?
Well, I came into it like my early films were more experimental or dramas or family dramas, you know, but there was a tension and a dread to them that was lent itself very naturally to horror, you know. I made a film called The Fading Light, which did amazingly well at festivals all over the world and won many awards. It won the best film at the Dublin Film Festival, but I couldn't get funding for a similar film after it, you know. So I said I'm going to have to find a different avenue in, a different way in, and if there's a way I could do that by through genre, by making something that's personal at the same time, I could do that. And I love horror movies. I've always loved horror movies, and I thought I'll try and write a horror movie. And then I wrote The Canals and I presented that to Screen Ireland and they loved it. And it went from there. So it wasn't a plan for me to become a horror movie director, you know, and you do kind of get pigeonholed sometimes as that. I've been lucky. I've made other type of movies as well, but I love horror and, you know, but I did come in it from the kind of sideways and I didn't plan it that way. And then people want more of the same then after, and it just continued from there.
course. Like I said, it's been a pleasure. It's been great chatting to you. I'd love to do it again. Maybe when some of these things get announced in the second half of this year, I would
Yeah,
love
it'd be
to
great.
maybe chat again. And like I said, for everybody, the links to Ivan's movies will be down below in the description, so check them out. And yeah, like I said, thanks. Wish you all the best. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Thanks a million.